Hello and good evening. It is great to be here with you, and it is really an honor, privilege, and pleasure for me to be here today to present a proclamation to those who started a movement that not only changed Atlanta, but ultimately the world. What I have here today is a proclamation from the Atlanta City Council. And the proclamation reads in pertinent part a story about the students from the Atlanta University Center that gathered at the old Yates and Milton drugstore one afternoon in early March of 1960s. Those students were Lonnie King, Joseph Pierce, and Julian Bond. But they were amongst many others who often used Yates and Milton as a gathering spot on the campuses of the Atlanta University Center. One of the things that they were talking about, and they often had spirited conversations between classes, was the Greensboro movement, in which where four students sat down at lunch counters and began a sit-in movement. One student, Lonnie King, said to another, Julian Bond, in the presence of Joseph Pierce, and he asked, should this movement or this type of movement happen in Atlanta? And Julian Bond said, sure, it'll eventually happen here. But then Lonnie King said, don't you think we need to make it happen here? And Julian Bond responded, sure. And then he said, before he could answer, Lonnie gave them the direction to Joseph Pierce and Julian Bond. You take one half of Yates and Milton, I'll take the others, and then let's begin to organize. And so they did that. They organized the students that were present. They began to have meetings around the Atlanta University Center. And ultimately, they met with the leadership of the colleges who were not terribly excited about what they were proposing. But Dr. Clement, who was the de facto head of the Atlanta University Center as president of what was then Atlanta University, gave them the inspiration, or some might say direction, to write a manifesto about what they were about to do. Those students gathered and they became the Committee on Appeal for Human Rights. They drafted a document largely written by one of the panelists of tonight's program, Dr. Rosalind Pope, and they laid down the concerns of not only themselves as students and African Americans in Atlanta, but of the greater African American community in the city. That document was published in March of 1960. That in the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. It also was published in the New York Times, in the Harvard Crimson, and ultimately was published in papers across the United States and the world, and now resides in the Library of Congress. That became a seminal document for which their movement, the constitution of their movement. They began activities around the city of Atlanta, sitting in here at Atlanta City Hall and in lunch counters and other public buildings all across Atlanta. Ultimately, the movement, as you heard tonight in great detail, hinged on a pivotal event that happened in October 19th of 1960. It was the first time that Dr. Martin Luther King became involved directly as a participant in the Atlanta student movement. This was his first public activity marching with the students after several of the committee went to him and beseeched him to become involved. Why this is important is that Dr. King had pledged to the political leadership in the Black community at the time that he would not lead any major movements since returning to live in Atlanta after leaving Alabama. He was actually sent a letter by the Black political leadership asking him to do so, and he wanted to keep his word. But the movement was gaining momentum. They were picketing at what was called Atlanta's favorite store, Rich's Department Store, which is the leading department store in the southeastern United States. Just imagine Macy's in New York by comparison, but covering that type of influence over the southeastern region of the United States. Dr. King joined that movement and was subsequently arrested. He was taken to the DeKalb County Jail, where he was sentenced in the court and was going to go to Reedsville Prison. But he had disappeared from record. His wife could not find him. No one could locate him or tell them where he was or what his disposition was, though many of the students who were arrested were released. So that began a call to the political candidates running for president at the time, principally Richard Nixon, who was a Republican. And what most people forget is that most African Americans at that time were what were called Lincoln Republicans. They were loyal to the Republican Party, voting heavily for Republicans with the exception of FDR. And so Nixon was first given the chance to intervene and try to help find out what had happened to Dr. King. His campaign sent their condolences to Mrs. King and their well wishes, but did not get involved. And so they turned to the Kennedy campaign, the Democrats. Most of the South was Democratic. They used to be called Dixiecrats, and that gives you some kind of indication of their mindset. So the Kennedy campaign got involved, found out where Dr. King was, and tried to make his release happen. This swayed the political fortunes and opinions in Atlanta. And so all over the Southeast, Daddy King, who had been a Republican, who at one time didn't know if he could vote for a Catholic, he stated that from the pulpit, changed his mind and endorsed Kennedy. And so that endorsement went throughout the southeastern United States in a blue flyer, which was euphemistically called the Blue Bomb. And that blue bomb changed the direction of the presidential election in 1960 and threw it in Kennedy's favor. So the Atlanta student movement, not only did it desegregate Atlanta, not only did it seed the mythology of the city of Atlanta and its great phrase, the city too busy to hate, and made it live up to that pledge, it changed and showed the world how nonviolent citizen action can change the world. And so with that, for those of you who are on the call that are members of the Atlanta student movement, a grateful city designates October the 19th, 2020 as Atlanta Student Movement and Appeal for Human Rights Day in our fair city. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and have caused the seal of the city of Atlanta to be hereunto affixed. Congratulations, our noble progenitors in the freedom movement. It is through you that all of our freedoms rest. God bless you and thank you.